poisoner in trains that scared the whole suburban area near Moscow. He has 17 victims on his account, and the most fascinating thing is that the criminal managed to escape the punishment for his crimes. How did a young boy, and by the way the son of a detective, become one of the most terrible poisoning maniacs of recent years? What promoted him to operate in trains, and what helped the cold-blooded killer to cut off the term? Alexey was born in 1986 in Vladivostok. In his teen years, he often ran away from home, and in 2000 he ran all the way to Moscow. There he got a job for a short time period. He was selling pies and pastries, but soon he had to go back to his hometown. It's no wonder that with such a free lifestyle, the teen got into a bad company. When Alexey was 16, he got arrested for theft. He was caught red-handed. The court sentenced him to 1 year in prison. Vygovsky served his term completely, but after he was free, he didn't leave his addiction to theft. Shortly after his release, Alexey decided to permanently move to Moscow. In such a large city, there are more opportunities for theft, and it's less likely to get caught. At first, the thief was engaged only in pickpocketing, but at one point he was no longer satisfied with this way of earning money. It was too risky. What if I get caught again? What if they recognize me? What if they use force and beat me up? Vygovsky didn't differ from the others in athletic physique, and he hardly could have resisted someone in a fight. So the pickpocket had no idea. He must first bring the victim into an unconscious state. But how to bring a person into an unconscious state, especially in a crowded place? It isn't so easy to do. But later, the experienced thief decided to put the potential victims into sleep with the help of neuroleptic drugs. Alexey's plan was as follows. Alexey mixed strong alcohol with an antipsychotic in a flask, and with this mixture that actually was slow-acting poison, he went to the nearest passenger train. Most likely he chose the daytime when there weren't so many passengers in the train. In the train, he looked through the passengers and chose his victim. Most often they were middle-aged men. He sat down next to them and started a conversation. When the man relaxed and Alexey gained his trust, Alexey would casually take out his flask and offer his victim a drink, either on the occasion of his own birthday or celebrate the birthday of his child. Now it seems very strange to us. How can you accept something from the hands of an unknown man to you? How can you take a sip from a complete stranger? But don't forget that the beginning of the 2000s, it is slightly different time. Back then, the internet wasn't such an active place. People simply did not know about the many cases of theft and or murder. For example, now the news of a murder on an electric train would spread at the speed of light, but at that time many could well remain in a happy ignorance of the robber who hunted in the suburban electric trains. In addition, the relative proximity of the Soviet era played a huge role. It was common to trust each other. It is worth nothing the fact that the most of those who died at the hands of poisoner maniac were people who easily trusted others. For example, according to the testimony of the relatives and friends of Maxim Pahomushkin, he was poisoned in 2008, was extremely native and too trusting. Some of them were already relatively elderly, like for example Alexander Prusky, who was poisoned in 2008. In people like him, a parental feeling of the young-looking boy could wake up, and in order not to offend the young father or birthday boy, they agreed to take the deathly sip. By the way, the poisoner, before treating a fellow traveler, would first take a sip from the flask himself. Actually, of course, he pretended to, but this convinced the victim. After some time, the victim who drank this cocktail, alcohol with the drug azaleptin, the person lost consciousness, and then the criminal calmly searched his pockets and belongings and got off at the next station. The passenger that was peacefully dozing in the train didn't concern anyone. Therefore, it was far from immediately revealed that the person was ill, and of course the criminal was already far away by that time. At first, it seems strange. Why give your victims a neuroleptic drug? Wouldn't it be easier just to give sleeping pills? However, Vygovsky was not so simple. After all, his main goal was not only to deprive the victim of the opportunity to resist, but also to obtain guarantees for the future that the victim wouldn't remember exactly who robbed them. Only a neuroleptic drug could give such a guarantee. A huge dose of a drug had a negative impact on the brain, and if the person survived, he did not remember anything, receiving serious and irreversible brain damage and change in the nervous system. The first victim of the criminal poisoner was a young man that was around 30 years old. He was peacefully riding in a train when a decent-looking guy sat down next to him and offered a drink to his newborn son. The unfortunate man was found dead in the same train. Moreover, the cause of death was also established, a potent drug. But due to the negligence of the police back then, everyone attributed it to the fact that the man killed himself. They said that the guy poisoned himself and there is no crime here. However, the dead man's credit card was stolen and there were even attempts to withdraw the money from it. The bank's cameras captured a hazy image of a man standing at the ATM. But all to no avail, no one wanted to take on this business. In 2006, shortly after starting his career as a poisoner, Vygovsky went back to prison, not for murder, but for theft. He only served 1 year again, and after he was released. Realizing that nobody cares about murders in the trains, the guy decided that he found a gold mine and started to live big. To make it more convenient, he put together a gang, taking 2 more people into his team, Shukrat Juraev and Ilya Trubanov. The 3 of them lived together in a rented apartment. Why did Vygovsky need this? As we remember, he was very cautious, and that's why Juraev and Trubanov stood on the nicks while the poisoner soldered and cleaned the pockets of his next victim. This went on for 2 whole years. During this time, the team managed to rob more than 30 people. Alexey got rich, began to buy expensive clothes for himself, bought a foreign car, and spoiled his girlfriend with expensive gifts, who didn't know what her boyfriend was doing. Vygovsky stole not only money, but also personal belongings and jewelry, which he then resold on the black market. It is likely that the 32 people that figured in the investigation case are only a part of victims that suffered from the criminal. Some possibly survived, but simply didn't go to the police. Some dead bodies found in the electric trains might not have been checked for the presence of antipsychotic drugs. Hence, the exact number of Vygovsky victims is forever covered in the darkness of uncertainty. The serious search for the criminal began only after one of the survivors came to the police. It was then when they remembered the video from the built-in camera at the ATM. The poisoner was arrested right at the train station. He was just about to get on the next train and had a flask with the hellish poison on him. During the interrogations, Alexey assured that he didn't want anyone's death, and that he didn't know that the people that left in the unconscious state were dying. Therefore, he should be tried solely for unintentionally causing death by negligence and robbery. The court considered this interpretation quite logical. Therefore, Vygovsky wasn't given a life sentence, which he fully deserved by the number of victims, 17 killed and 15 injured, handicapped for the rest of their life, but only 22 years and 3 months in the strict regime colony. Thus, Vygovsky will be released approximately in 2033, and maybe even earlier. After all, no one cancelled the parole for exemplary behavior. One of the maniac poisoner's colleagues, Shukrat Juraev, received 15 years in jail, and Ilya Trubanov died during the investigation. He had a severe addiction. Of course, Alexey Vygovsky cannot be called a classical maniac. He killed with the intention to get rich. The guy wanted a luxurious life, but the thief clearly didn't want to work. He was addicted to theft from childhood. He saw them as an easy way to the passionately desired achievement. And yet, Vygovsky was not a traditional pickpocket either. It is worth remembering that petty thieves try to avoid murder. For them, it was both unprofitable and troublesome. But this person wasn't like that. Without any double thought, he cold-bloodedly killed 15 people. 2 more victims were on the accounts of his parents. It is hardly possible to trust Vygovsky that he didn't know about the death of his victims. The actions of the Moscow poisoner betray him as cautious and even a cowardly person. Surely after the first case, which ended by the way in a murder, he didn't monitor the news, didn't try to find any information about the body found in the train. Moreover, the further continuation of the terrible career indicates that Alexey was well aware of the fatal outcome in the case of the first victim, and it was the lack of punishments for this crime that prompted Alexey to continue. So is Alexey Vygovsky a maniac? The nickname Moscow Poisoner suited him the best, but still, it is likely that Vygovsky, like a real maniac, experienced some satisfaction precisely from the process of killing or from leaving his victim in danger. The thirst for easy money is truly indestructible. In 2019, a similar criminal to Alexey Vygovsky suddenly appeared. 26-year-old Murat Sabanov took his place. He worked in a similar way. In the hot summer of 2019, he approached young people on the street and offered them sips of soda. As we can see over the past years, not everyone managed to become more cautious, and the poisoning scheme remained to work quite well. The woman Lyudmila Chizhova became one of Murat's first victims. In the beginning of June, she was walking with her friends on Chistые Prudy. Suddenly, a man who introduced himself as Murat approached them and joined their company. While they were walking around the city, the woman complained that she was thirsty, and the stranger offered her a chilled soda. After the first sip, Lyudmila lost consciousness and ended up in a hospital in coma. The next 3 days, the girl spent in a coma, which followed from the poisoning of an unknown psychotropic substance. Subsequently, it turned out that at least 24 people were similarly affected. The young man who introduced himself first as Murat, then as Anvar, then as Azamat, casually offered Fanta, Coca-Cola, or either just water to thirsty strangers. Beforehand, he added phenazepam and tramadol to the bottles with liquids. These drugs were found on Sabanov's personal belongings. After the victims passed out, he took their credit card, cash, and jewelry. Murat operated exclusively in the Basman district because he was familiar with the local police and therefore he felt confident. Usually, all of Sabanov's victims were slightly tipsy. They were going to Chistые Prudy to have fun and relax, and perhaps therefore they weren't that cautious. As a result, the robber was arrested. During the investigation, he was charged with 30 episodes of poisoning and robbery. 5 victims suffered severe bodily harm. As a total, the poisoner managed to steal valuables and money for a total of 1 million rubles. Currently, the trial is ongoing and the follower of Alexey Vygovsky is clearly facing a considerable time. By the way, a case of negligence was also initiated against the policemen who were familiar with the criminal, who once, after the arrest, released him on bail, after which the poisoning of course continued, despite the fact that the victim's belongings were found in Murat Sabanov's pockets. At trial, the defendant admitted his guilt only partially. Following the example of Vygovsky, Sabanov also declares that he did not intend to cause serious harm to the victim's death.